Hey, everybody. Welcome to Extra Hours. So good to see everybody here for our second show of the day. We're here with some of the usual suspects. Guy Cochran is here. Hey, Guy.
Yo, good to see you.
NASA control room, and I also help business owners set up and optimize home studios so they can be their best when they show up.
It's great. It's interesting. Most of us who do this regularly have these kind of spaceship setups. We've got. I was trying to. Someone was asking me if I use. I think it was Jeff Francis. I was staying at Jeff Francis' house over the weekend, I think he was asking me if I'd use the Apple Vision Pro as a to have a virtual set of monitors or virtual things. And I was like, you got to understand, I got 9 monitors. It was like, I can't, like, I like to go down to what I could do with an Apple Vision Pro would be very hard.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Now, do you find what kind of businesses are really talking to you about improving their presence? Is it businesses or specific executives or specific people?
So I am specific. What I have found is that business owners are willing to invest,
Right.
whereas there are executives, but they don't have the time. They just want it done. And folks that are leaders within organizations really don't have the motivation to spend the money to upgrade their own studio. So I
Right.
found that it really is. And what I tell people is the way you show up online determines your credibility. It
Yeah.
establishes your authority. What I've learned here through this show. And so the people who are selling online, right? So there are some sales roles that can see the monetary benefit of showing up with more authority.
Yep.
But in my experience, it has been small business owners who are really the most willing to
Right.
kind of put in the investment and see the pretty immediate payoff as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So Grant, you're somewhere in the South. Where in the South Pacific are you? Do you know? Because I bet you there's not a lot of
Do I know?
landmarks. There's not like a lot of like, oh, it's over these
Let me
mountains.
let me show you. All right. Yeah, so I'm on my way back to Sydney. I've been on a 7-day cruise. It'll be noisy out here, but
This is
I'm
great.
just giving you proof.
Watch him drop it.
And there goes Grant.
I've had 16. So
It's funny, what's amazing is how futuristic it is. Like we are only a couple years ago when you won a cruise ship, you basically got maybe phone calls if you were lucky. And now we're streaming, almost 30 frames a second at high resolution from a ship. It's amazing.
it's pretty amazing. Yeah, so it's been working pretty well. It seems to be Starlink, and they have it pretty locked down QoS wise. It's some things go very, very slowly, but this is working well. I think I'm doing 3 meg up and down. It
Right.
seems to be sitting around that, and it's pretty consistent. So yeah, I'm on a cruise, which is it's a carnival ship. There's about 2,500 passengers and 1,000 crew. It was a 7-night cruise, and it's been chartered by a company called Choose Your Cruise, and they do music-based cruises. And so they bring on all these extra artists, and they set up extra stages throughout the ship. And so I mix an a cappella band, and so I'm the sound guy. They graciously called me their 6th member, which is very nice. They're a five-piece vocal band, and then I mix them. And so we just had to do 2 shows, and so it was on the same day.
But it's not
and
like
so
you
it
can
was
go
like,
home. So you
no,
just
that's
had-
right. No, but
That's
we're
great.
about to do a tour as well, so we've been doing rehearsals and everything.
All
It's
right.
been pretty amazing. So what's actually pretty cool about what these guys do, the Choose Your Cruise people. So they do this one, which is more like it's the average age on in the passengers is very, very high. It's lots of music. lots of musical theatre. There's some classical music. It's very that type of music. But what these guys do is they back it up. So we get off on tomorrow morning. We get off, and tomorrow afternoon, a whole new music cruise boards, and it's a rock cruise. It's a very different clientele. But what's very clever about what they do, those guys have spent this last week, the 7 days, on the top deck. They put a stage over the pool, the center pool on the top deck. They put a stage across it, and then that's where they set up seats, and then they put this huge stage at one end of the pool. And it's a massive rig. I'll take some photos and post them, but it's a huge rig for it's a rock and roll festival.
Right.
And so they take 7 days to set it up while this kind of pleasant, quiet, event is on. And then they'll bring a whole bunch of younger people on for a rock cruise. And so it's a very clever way of doing it. But
and are there rock bands that we would know? Is it a
Australian bands, it's like Jimmy Barnes is
the Hoodoo Gurus? So you got the Hoodoo Gurus coming?
I don't think so, but
I'm a huge Hoodoo Guru fan. I just want to say, I would go on the cruise if the Hoodoo Gurus
there you go.
were playing.
Yeah, so it is a unique experience for artists as well, who are kind of rubbing shoulders a little with their audience for a week. And so, but there's a full orchestra. There's an orchestra as well. And so last night it was a bit rocky. It's been very smooth sailing this whole time, and then last night it started to get rocky. And so it is a weird experience to be in a full, 1,500 seat theatre, and it just swaying around, and and the violins are kind of like this, and so it's
some of them are saying, I didn't sign up for this. Like, this isn't what I expected. No one told me about the waves.
Exactly, it's a bit like that. But anyway, so it's pretty amazing that I'm able to join like this. And the other thing that I've been doing during this time as well is mixing an album. So isn't this amazing? You talk about technology. Pro Tools running on my MacBook Air.
Right.
I've got a heap of plugins, and the CPU's barely hitting 20% when I'm running all these tracks. And I was just saying before, like, trying to choose what monitoring headphones or how I was going to do it. Ultimately, the best thing that I found, AirPods Pro, the new ones, the version 2, have been amazing for me just mixing, being able to mix.
I just got them, mostly, and for me, it's mostly because I went to see. I was doing working on a benefit on Friday with Toe the Wet Sprocket and Bare Naked Ladies, but they were playing in Colombia the day before, and I got on the list, and so I went and had pretty good tickets, but I came out, my ears are broken, like they've been broken after going to so many concerts, and the problem is I don't like putting in I don't like putting in earplugs because it all sounds like it's underwater, like it doesn't work. And so I just was, the new AirPod Pro 2, I didn't wear them for the show because I didn't have them, but I was like, I walked out, my ears were hurting a little bit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to solve this. Up to $300, got to find something that's going to give me. So I ordered these and they're now, because Apple wouldn't say this, but I guess a lot of people were using them for this, but they'll cancel. It's like 25 to 30 dB. If you put them in your ears, and they do it with EQ that cleans up, it's like not just putting stuffing, a piece of rubber in your head, it's actually doing a smart. So my next concert, I'll be testing them probably soon. I've been going to a lot more shows than I used to.
Well, and the next thing will be the hearing aid function too, right? So
it's coming right behind it for me, like it's.
So you'll be able to do the test. And the hearing test will be interesting anyway. Yeah. And then it essentially would apply that profile to a hearing aid mode. And so I think people would just end up wearing these things all the time. And the range on it is what's amazing.
The what?
The sound of it, the range,
Yeah.
the frequency response on it is been really impressive. Especially I've got the Maxes as well,
Yeah.
and I just find them very dull. I find them, they're just a bit MIDI and a bit heavy, and the tops aren't very
Have you
bright.
used them? Have you used them with the Apple Vision Pro, the AirPod Pros?
Yes, both. Yep.
And do you like the
I'm
AirPod Pros
torn.
better?
I'm torn now, right? I'm torn between whether to use the Max or the Pros, particularly on the plane. And there's a comfort level of over the ear,
See, my problem
but
is
then they're a bit heavier. I don't
my
know.
problem is my head's too big. I mean, physically too big. So I mean, it may be emotionally too big too, but my head is physically too big. And so when I put the Apple Vision Pro, I just watched them. I was watching movies on the flight home, and the problem is I can't quite get the
Mm.
Maxes over the Apple Vision Pro and to have them seal 100%. There's just like a little
Ah,
bit of a crack because I just can't quite. My head's just a little too big to get both of them over. By themselves they're fine. And I've always had a problem with, I mean, like hats and stuff like that. so
and so
it's not.
and so did you use the Pros on the way home
No,
instead?
because they just came after I
Oh,
ordered
you
them
just got
after,
them.
so I
Okay.
haven't tested them, but I'm gonna try it with them. With it, because as you know, I mean, flying with an Apple Vision Pro is kind of the best thing ever.
It's amazing.
It's
Yeah,
just
it's
incredible.
next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have someone, I had someone on the flight. One of the flight attendants came up, and I, could, I had the like an environment turned on, so I couldn't really see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I eventually got my attention, and then said, "Can you see me through them? Can you see me?" And I
Hmm.
was like, "Oh yeah, I can see you." He's like, "Yeah, just a safety issue. It's a safety issue, And he was really like, he was kind of thrown by it all. And I was like, "What's the difference with just putting an eye patch on for sleeping?
Right.
Like like a eye mask. It's
Exactly. Because I
like
have one of those ones
you
that
don't
I have
stop people with that."
when I decide I want to sleep. I put ones on that have little cups on them so that your eyelashes don't hit them or whatever. And I put them on. That's like I'm going to try to sleep, even though I never have ever slept sitting up. Like but
Yeah,
it's like Lucy in the football. I'm like, eventually I'm going to kick that. I'm going to kick that football. Like and I every red eye I try it. I tried it again this time and didn't work. So,
right.
but yeah,
Well, all this to say that I'm on a cruise ship. We're trusting Starlink, but it would be silly for me to think that I could just host the show. So it's back to you again, Alex,
all
for
right. Well, let's go
hosting.
ahead and
We'll
jump
see what
into the
happens.
questions. Guy, what do we got?
First one's coming in from Mike Muddy Schlegel in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he asks, is it problematic to have multiple routers downstream of each other? And what precautions are needed related to DHCP? I have 2 fiber connections coming into a dual WAN router, then to a Nest router and network switch.
Go ahead, Carl.
So it can be an issue. DHCP has to be set up correctly. So DHCP is the one you want on the edge of your network, so your local area network. So whichever router is closest to your switch and all the NICs inside your network, that one is DHCP, so it can associate IP address to all the devices on the network. The router on the outside, which is the one that's actually technically attached to the WAN, that one you don't want DHCP associated to. So you're going to have to manually put in the IP address of the router you're going to. So doing this, it can look like this kind of topology. So this is where you would have your switch, you have router 1, router 2. Now you may be doing this where you have each router going to a different ISP, but this is a daisy chain in effect for ISP 1. So ISP may be your main ISP and ISP 2 may be your backup. It may just be a Nighthawk or something like that. But so by doing this, router 1 in this case would be no DHCP. Router here would just be the one with DHCP on, and so forth. There is some you want to follow that. There's kind of a set program to go. The other way to actually do that kind of setup would also be if you're doing another topology, which is more common in commercial environments, would be having a dual router system going out to one WAN, or it could be 2 WANs. This is more for backup or for DNZs and stuff like that. So you can have like a local, essentially off. So what's called a local network that's not in the DMZ, which could be like if you're going to get attacked, it's going to get to the DMZ zone before it comes in. And this kind of topology gets a little bit more complicated because you have to you link the 2 routers up. It can be done. There's a lot of information online about how to do it. But you really need to ask the question is, why do you want two routers? You know, if the reason you want two routers is because of feature based, just pick the router that has the feature you need for that particular application. And then you can just switch between routers. So rather than having two routers running concurrently, because it will increase latency quite a lot as well. Having the outside internet navigate through ports. So port forwarding. So there's a lot of things that can be done automatically if you have one router. When you have two routers, the automatic features all turn off. Port forwarding and stuff has to kind of turn off. Software can't it'll do port forwarding on the first router, but the router that's touching the WAN doesn't know that, so you have to manually do it on that one. And then for security reasons, port forwarding can change. Software changes the port forwarding sometimes to make sure people can't come in and out. So it becomes a bit of a headache, and there's a lot of manual setting up if you're going to do it that way.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I've got a similar setup, Mike, and I've spoken to John, who couldn't make it this week, but I'm sure he'll be back soon, and he's got some ideas about how to manage this well. Congrats, Muddy, about getting a Peplink router. I've got 3 now, different Peplink routers, and the thing that's awesome, particularly for the type of work that you and I do, Muddy, is being able to use things like Speed Fusion, so a bonded connection, and using something like WAN smoothing that you can do, which is essentially pushing the same content out all your WAN connections. And it just takes the lowest latent one when it gets to the Speed Fusion servers. But what's really cool is that you can choose the type of data that you want to go through Speed Fusion. So in our instance, when we're doing Zoom, I can say I want all the Zoom traffic to go over WAN smoothing Speed Fusion. And so then I have two couple of cellular connections and my main fiber connection. And so now that same Zoom content is being sent across those 3 WAN connections through to Speed Fusion server. And then if one drops, it seamlessly moves across to the other one. So it's a really great way of doing what we do while still managing your other content. And that's another thing that I do too, is then have VLANs set up, and so kind of have other devices that are not high priority are going out on like a secondary WAN. Starlink, often I have a Starlink connection, and that runs all my extra things that are not show critical. Particularly in the home, I can have all the kids' Netflix and things like that is all just going out Starlink. It doesn't touch my main fiber connection at all. And so it's a great way to do it. But I'm still sort of working on, because I have a Ubiquiti unified network, Dream Machine and all of that, and that is plugged into a Peplink router. And so I know that I haven't quite got it optimized yet, but we can probably compare notes on that, Muddy, once we get it working.
Are they still making the Dream Machine called a Dream Machine? Because when I look for it, it seems like
Yes.
there's Ubiquities that are, but there's like Ubiquiti that
There's
looks exactly
routers.
like it.
They have probably about 10 routers now. So the Dream Machine was their only one. They're getting Ubiquiti's getting quite large in what they're offering. But there's about 10 routers that come under the Dream Machine.
I mean, they all look the same. And they're not, and some of them look exactly like the Dream Machine, except that they don't say Dream Machine.
If you mean the rack-mounted version?
Yeah.
So the rack-mounted version, there's the original rack-mounted version which didn't have PoE. Then there's the Dream Machine SE, which had PoE. And now we have the Dream Machine version 3, let's call it. They give it a special name. That has dual WAN. It has 2.5 WAN. It has all these kind of things as well. So it's essentially they're just feature adding, but they're not getting rid of one. It's like iPhone 14, 15, 16, but they're keeping all of them in the lineup. That's really what's happening. So they are upgrades, but they're keeping the old one in line. So it's confusing. So if you just want the cheaper old one, then fine. But if you want the features that are found in the SE, which the SE also has hard drive recording, and then the top of the line one at the moment, it has a lot more features. You can put 2 together. You can link 2 together, so you can have redundancy, so double redundancy. That's only in the newest one, though.
And what's the difference between the special edition and the regular one?
Hard drive recording and PoE.
So the regular one doesn't have PoE. Just it's
Yeah, so PoE's only found that, and some people believe that the SE was kind of a like, oh, because the SE came out pretty quickly after the original one.
Right.
It's because they didn't put PoE on it. So you couldn't hook up cameras directly. So if you just want to have a very simple security camera set up, you can hook up your cameras directly to this. It powers PoE. You don't need any other devices. You couldn't do that with the original one. You needed to have a switch in the middle that had PoE.
like the US price. Some of them are $385, and then they go up to about $500, and it's.
So the SE's got PoE and better hard drives, or what comes with a higher hard drive and stuff like that.
But pretty much the feature set is the same, like the $350 version. The Pro is pretty much the same, except for
so there's a speed difference as well with the SE. So the SE is not really a big jump. The newest one in the
I'm talking about the Pro. So there's the Pro. So Dream Machine Pro, which kind of confusingly is the lowest. I mean, there's the Dream Machine Pro. There's the Special Edition. There's the Dream Machine Pro Max, and then there's the
Max is the
Dream
newest
Wall.
one. Yeah.
So
there's a Fortress Gateway. So the Fortress Gateway is going to be the highest. The Dream Wall is kind of a separate product category technically, and then you've got the Dream Router as well. Dream Router's really nice for the price, I've got to admit.
Right.
But yeah, Dream Machine Pro. It does have, so I know that it has it's also client based as far as the CPU as well, but I believe that this is the reason why there's a special edition, the SE, they believe was kind of like we forgot to put PoE in there. So because it's really the biggest thing is PoE. It's not till you get to the Max that you jump up in quite a lot of power. But yeah, the Max adds the 2 hard drive bays, where the Pro and the Special Edition have the 1 hard drive bay. I think it's really kind of only PoE is the main feature. That's the difference between the SE and the Pro. But there are smaller. Well, I think the chipset inside is actually identical. So I think the speeds for everything is identical.
Right.
So yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about here, Alex, is it's all less than 1 Alex.
I know.
So it just seems like you should just be getting the highest you get.
I had the typical problem that I have, which is like, well, $385, $499 is not that much more. And then once I'm at $499, the Max version is $599. I'm like, well, I'm already halfway there. I might as well just keep going. And so the next thing you know, I'm going to buy, a server farm. Like that's the problem. Like
meanwhile, you've told your wife it's only like $300. It's like it's $300, and then you've sent 600. Yeah,
that's how this all works. For me, I just keep ratcheting.
I do tell you though, I would buy something with 2.5 gig, compatibility, particularly on the WAN. That's the only thing. I've got the Pro, and I know that it's not long away that I'll be able to wind up my fiber to more than 1 gig, and I'd like to do that, but my network doesn't support it. Yeah. Particularly the PoE thing, I don't think is a big deal either, because as Carl said, it's if you're not going to have a switch, you've got 1 million devices in your house, you're going to want to have a switch anyway. You'll buy a PoE switch.
Yeah, I've got a 16 by in front of me. So yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Exactly. Once you get into this ecosystem, you're going to want the switches that are ubiquity as well. So the lineup, if it were me buying today, right now I own the Pro. I would get the Pro Max because it does have the larger back plane. I tend to not use those ports that are on the front and just have a switch. But this one, if you do have a smaller atmosphere, you can just plug in PoE from the front, and versus having to buy a switch that has PoE. So I'm on this weird kick right now where I have the one Pro Max 2.5 gig switch, and then I have a 48 port that's non-PoE, and then I have some stuff that I have to actually get PoE adapters now because I cheaped out until I want to buy the next 48 port Pro Max version to get my 2.5 gigs all over the place. So that thing's like $1,299. So it's, you get into these weird stages where you're like, am I going to put all my users on 2.5 gig? Do I want my NAS to be 10 gig? Because you watch what those ports are. So I have a 10 gig pipe coming in. My ISP supports 10 gig. So I have a 10 gig NIC that goes into that wide area network. And then I have a secondary network that is failover, pure failover. So, Muddy, to answer your original question, yeah, that's the way most people have it set up, is complete failover, not aggregation, because aggregation could send stuff, could actually slow things down if you have aggregation mode on. So I would put it on pure failover if you have a fast enough port. If you're doing ISP1 and ISP2. And then watch out if you accidentally have DHCP running on the network with two, they could fight each other and cause collisions. And I had a device that fried itself, like just they did battle, I guess. And it was my voice over IP phone head unit, and that thing was like $2,000. So when it went down,
and I actually think that's what was happening for me. The situation, because I'm helping run client events, I wanted that redundancy, and I'm in a fortunate position that I have two fiber providers right accessible to my home studio. So I've got both Google Fiber and AT&T Fiber, and they each provide their own, gateway device, which most people don't have a setup like we do, right? So most people just use this device from the provider that is both the gateway, it's the router, and the modem, right? But I want these to only be modems, and so they come into this failover, and it's listening to conversations like this, and I'm like, oh, I probably need to upgrade that dual WAN. But I think these two, the Google one does have the ability to essentially turn off the router function and have it just be kind of pass through as a modem. The AT&T one did not. The original model I had did not have that ability, so I just had them send me an upgraded one that can do that, because I think these two, well, this AT&T one and the system farther downstream were fighting with each other, because all four of them were trying to take over the system, right? Or we're trying to do DHCP, and so because there's actually 4 devices that have routing capability in them, and they were all fighting with each other. So what I'm hearing is these need to all just be modems that are just passing through. This dual WAN router is best to be in failover mode. So one is the primary and then one is the backup, is one option that you're saying. Grant's talking about another potential option with the Speedify. But then the Nest system, which is actually the farthest downstream, the closest to my devices.
And what's
Carl's
the Nest?
saying
What's
that's
the
the one
value
that
of the
really
Nest
ought to
system?
be running the DHCP.
And what's the
That's
value
right.
of the Nest? Why is the Nest there?
The Nest is there because there are 6 pucks around there. It's a mesh network around the house, in the attic, and in the basement, in the backyard, and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do
How's that
bridge
working
mode,
for
I
you?
guess. Yeah.
How's the mesh working for you?
It seems to work fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue I have is the AT&T one. I noticed that it is kind of stealing traffic and slowing things down, and so I have to reset the network, at the beginning of each event day just to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, I use surfboards, so I get surfboard modems with DOCSIS 3 point whatever, and they're a cat cable. You can get ones that are now 2.5 gig, that are out there. Mine's only 1 gig, so I have and that eliminate. I have Comcast, and I hate that they give you free wire. It's a feature like, hey, if you have Comcast, you can have free wireless because you're using everybody else's connection.
Yeah,
I was like, that just freaks me out. Like and so I'm like, no, thank you. I'll put my own modem in. And so I have that. And then again, I'm looking for a variety of reasons. I didn't buy them immediately, but I am looking at getting a Ubiquity and then kind of just slowly backing out. I had a mesh network, and it just was never as stable as I wanted it to be. And so now I'm looking at Ubiquity, everything, APs, switches, everything. And I asked a good friend of mine who used to be the network, was the CTO for a college of, I don't know, tens of thousands of people. Sure. And they use Meraki's, of course, for that. But I said, but when he left the college, I said, he'd been using Meraki for a decade. I said, so did you put Meraki into his house? And he's like, oh, I don't get that kind of money. He's like, and he goes, I put Ubiquity through the entire house. And that's all I needed to know. Like, if you're not going to use a Meraki system, use a Ubiquity system. I had a fleet of Meraki. And if you're managing lots of routers in the cloud, if you're managing lots of routers, the creature comforts of Meraki are so much better than everything else that you don't really think about, as long as you can charge somebody for it, it all works out. But it is something you're paying every year. You're paying, we were paying probably $3,000 a year for, just using the cloud
having
access.
everything work as a system together. I mean, Ubiquity is excellent at that. That's what we ended up putting in our church and part of the church AV team. And when we designed
Right.
that system and renovated the building, being able to map it all out and having kind of all of that management in one system makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I'm probably by the end of the year, I'll probably have all Ubiquity, because now I'm trying to wire up my garage because I'm doing more things there. so anyway, let's go to the next question.
All right. Next one's coming in from Karen Addis in Melbourne, Australia. And they ask, Zoom web recording was 1920 by 836. Every month it has been 1920 by 1080 until last month. Is this a Zoom thing or XSplit or something else?
I go ahead, Muddy.
So the first question I would ask is whether this is a local recording or a cloud recording. So one thing to be aware of with a local recording in Zoom, it's recording at the resolution that your window is in, and it's recording whatever is showing on that machine. If you switch to gallery view, local recording is going to capture gallery. Switch to speaker view, it's going to capture speaker. So a local recording is really depending on the window and the size that you're watching it. Now, if this is cloud recording, there are a couple of other things that come into play. My understanding with the cloud recording is it will record at the highest resolution that the meeting ever got to. And that's what the cloud recording will stay in, is my understanding. No?
Alex? No, that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So for instance, if someone connects to a meeting with a phone, it's going to drop down to 720p as a max. And again, the account level has to be enabled for it. So you're saying that every month you've had the ability to do 1920 by 1080, but this month it went to 1920 by 836. So my guess is if it was a local recording, perhaps the local window was a different size. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, that I was going to say the same thing about local recording, but the only other thing I'd suggest is that from a cloud recording point of view, exactly as Muddy said, if the highest that the recording went to for video was 720, it'd be 720 by 1280. And then if someone's screen shared, and this is my guess, is that someone screen shared at exactly that size. They shared a window. Mm-hmm. Maybe they didn't share their whole screen. They just shared a window, and it was 1920 by 836. And so now your recording has been scaled up to that size. And now all the 720p video has gone to that. And now everything has gone to that size because that was the largest it went with the screen share. That's my guess.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend considering using some of the other tools that Zoom provides to record, as opposed to recording to locally or in the cloud. We use those as backups, so we'll turn those on as a backup to the meeting. But we're using typically Zoom ISO, even if it's just active speaker or active. You grab a couple things. There's a couple different ways you can record. But if it matters, really think about using some, whether it's Zoom ISO or something else. And there's a variety of ways you can record those. You can record everybody individually. You could have active speaker. You could record, for instance, active speaker and screen record, but the screen is going to come out at 1080, whatever they do, and it'll box it in. So it's maybe not the full res that it was before, but you're going to get files that you can actually edit together to make that actually work. So it is something to kind of consider for meetings that matter. The one thing to note is that as of last week, as of Thursday or Friday or Wednesday or something of last week, Zoom has changed all the licensing for it, which is incredible. So it used to be, if you wanted to get 1080, you would need to get 10 business licenses. And then if you wanted Zoom ISO and all the other things that are there, you'd be paying for those a la carte per month and so on and so forth on top of that. Now, if you get the events license, it's $149 a month. So it's not free. It's $149 a month, and you get the 1080p. The 1080p just comes with it. And also you get all the liminal tools. so you get those all at the same time. So it is a dramatically, if you're doing this as a business, or if your company's doing this in places that matter, then the new Zoom event licensing is probably something you want to look at. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So the one time I've seen this before is someone just shared a 21 by 9 screen in Zoom.
Yeah.
So
I
if
think
someone has a slightly curved Samsung, Dell 21:9 screen, they share that, they're not thinking, then that will actually come in, and because it's the maximum zoom is 1080 by 1920, it'll simply go, okay, 1080 by, by
and
obviously, yeah, that's
and if
why.
you're having random people coming in for a meeting and you're doing this and you're trying to save it all makes sense. If your company is starting to do something that is like, hey, this matters, like we're gonna do this all the time, and this is important to us, then having your speakers, the regular speakers, having a little bit more equipment locally that can be, that can manage some of these things. That might be a little ATEM switcher and a better camera, and they can start switching back and forth, or they can send those things in, but it's kind of forcing some of those things, or you're paying attention to what kind of resolutions are coming in. Maybe something to think about, because, I think that, I think what Muddy's talked about a little earlier is how important this is to the future. We talk a lot about what I call the 5 nines, which is, the 99.999% of the people that will never go to your event ever, no matter how good it is. 99.999% of the world never going to go. And so, because they can't get the visas, they can't get the time, they don't have the money, whatever that is. It's a big world out there, and you're ignoring most of it. When you do a physical event, the gravity of that is that over time, as these tools get better, and if you look at this show today, I haven't looked at it yet on YouTube, but generally it's pretty sharp. It looks pretty good. And it's starting. One of the things we're always committed to in office hours and extra hours and all is to experiment with new ways of doing things, but keep on pushing this quality bar up so that people know, like, this is possible. Like, this is, like, it doesn't have to be as bad as everybody's virtual meetings, including sometimes Zooms. So anyway, the Zoom, I don't think that necessarily gives the best example of what could be done with their own platform. So I think that that's something to keep thinking about. Yeah, go ahead, Muddy.
You were mentioning the update where new Zoom events licensing. One of the other benefits is that 1080p will be enabled automatically. Previously,
Right.
You've had to submit request tickets and go back and forth, and in some cases, argue your case in order to get this enabled. So, to have that enabled automatically means you're getting that quality, all those bonus tools, and it's really a great thing to see, the new licensing.
Yeah, new licensing really makes a lot of sense for a lot of people who are going to do this. That if Zoom is your business, whether it's you're supporting other people, or it's something that's important to your marketing division, or important to your training division, or important to whatever, this is a great value to look at. I'm glad that they've started to figure it out. I think part of it is there's just all these pieces floating around at Zoom, and I think as they mature, they were able to kind of package them together in a way that made sense. And so it's pretty exciting. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Karen Addis in Melbourne, Australia, and they ask, need to provide my own network on site using Netgear Nighthawk with switch plugged into Ethernet and iPad with mixed effect on its Wi-Fi, ATEM Mini Extreme ISO webcam into Zoom. Is Nighthawk my only option?
Good, Carl.
So the Nighthawk is a modem and router. It technically has a switch because you can hook up one thing to Ethernet. Well, it's technically a Wi-Fi switch. So you can switch things, multiple devices can attach to it via Wi-Fi, one can attach via Ethernet, and one can attach via USB-C. So it does have a primitive switch in there, but it's not really a switch. So you're saying you need to provide your own network. You're not saying whether you need that network to have internet. So the Nighthawk will give your network internet, and you're saying you're plugging in a switch already to the Nighthawk via Ethernet. Well, that's kind of correct. So the switch is actually providing the network that you're plugging in, and the Ethernet connection to the Nighthawk is providing that network with a router that'll reach out to the internet and allow everything on that network to have access to the internet. So remember, there's network, which is switch-based, router, which is a device that is used to connect a network to the internet or to a wide area network, and the modem, which is kind of be the 5G, 4G modem in there, is actually the thing that actually does the connection to an ISP. So we kind of, if you're just talking about if you don't need internet access, your switch alone with a power supply, I guess, that's all you need. If you need your network to have access to a wide area network, i.e. the internet, then yeah, you're doing exactly right. So everything you said, that you've got a switch plugged in via Ethernet to the Nighthawk, that will give your network, which is the switch, and access to the internet via the Nighthawk. The Nighthawk is not a switch. It technically has switching capabilities, but I would never use it as a switch for what you're doing is correct. A switch plugged in via Ethernet to the Nighthawk is spot on how you'd want to do it.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I often find, one of the things I'm doing this week with the band here is I run the whole show off an iPad and use Mixing Station, which I love, and I've just found everything's just a little happier when it can see the internet, even if I don't need the internet, particularly the iPad. iPad won't bug me and say, oh, there's no internet on this. Would you like me to switch over to cellular, or would you like to go to something else? I'm like, and so even if you don't need the internet, I have found that just having it sitting there just makes everything work nicer. And of course, you can get a message or two through, and things like that will work well. So I've got the Nighthawk, and I use that. You can do USB-C to a computer, which will charge it as well as pass through the data as well. That's another way of doing it, which is nice. But I don't know. Oh, yeah, I said about my contraband travel router on the cruise ship here. So this is the one that I use, which is GLINet, and this is which one's this one? The AX1800. This is Wi-Fi 6. Super powerful. Like you've got WAN, and then you've got a couple of LAN ports, and what I'm using this for, and actually I should be careful because my computer's running off of it now. Yeah, is that it's repeating the cruise Wi-Fi, which is why it's contraband. They don't want them to do that. And I've got it in a little backpack here, and I'll run a little, not a little, but I've got a Anchor battery. I run the whole thing like that. I put it in this little satchel, and I'll walk around the ship, and it means that I can run all my devices, but also the six and their families, all their people that I'm with. It's kind of funny because I'm on deck 4. I'll go up to the banquet area on deck 9 or 10. And suddenly all the people I'm with are like, oh, Grant's nearby, because my phone just lit up and WhatsApp started working because I'm sharing the internet. So it's like, we know that Grant's nearby because the internet just came on. Anyway, I really like that little router. It's nice and compact and super powerful. And you can plug in a phone to it as well, and it'll share the hotspot off your phone through the cable. And it kind of has some redundancy in that as well. And you could repeat Wi-Fi, and of course just have WAN coming into it as well from Ethernet. So, but what you're doing is fine. The Nighthawk will work great with a switch. That'll work as your DHCP, and just a dumb switch will work perfectly for what you're talking about. And so, yeah, I was just saying about the internet. I think it's worth having internet on it, even if you don't need it. It just makes everything happy.
What's Mixing Station?
Mixing Station is a guy, he slips my name, his name slips my mind, but wrote a custom app for, actually we've had him on Office Hours, right? Guy, do you remember this? Yeah.
Yeah, we did have him.
Must have been a day I was on.
Yeah. It's a custom app for controlling sound desks.
Right. And
what's interesting is that the Behringer's XR18, like their X-Air range, and I think, well, at least the X-Air range, they haven't been updating, and the X32, they haven't updated the iOS apps in years and years.
Because they got the wing, which didn't make any sense until the new wing came out, but now it makes sense because the new wing software is much more advanced.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, but it has been many years.
Yeah.
And what happened is on the official Behringer website, they point to Mixing Station as an option to control. Now, the thing that's amazing about Mixing Station is you can customize the interface to your heart's content, which is really amazing for me in the show that I do, because I don't have a lot of inputs because I've got 5 voices. It's an a cappella band, so I've got 5 microphone inputs. But then all of my effects, all of the control that I want, the decays on my effects, the delays, all of that are on the single screen. I don't have to change pages or anything. I can just see everything.
So you have little
in front of me.
modules that you can just kind of put on the screen as you like.
You can customize everything. You want your faders to be full width, full height, so you can create full height faders, and you can turn on what buttons do you want. Do you want an EQ curve on there or not? Do you want a mute button there or not? Solo button or not? All of that. Pan left and right. You want that on? No. Like you can have meter bridge turned on, and so all your sends on faders, buttons, and then custom buttons. So I've got a custom button that does tap for delay. I've got another custom button that turns off an EQ on one of the channels at one point for part of the show, and then it comes back on. And anyway, so hey, I really love it, and it works for what do they got now?
So many. I saw. Yeah, I looked on the
lots.
website. I was like, oh, and the thing is, it's the Behringers,
Lots.
the Midases, the Allen Heath, tons of Allen Heath, Personas, Soundcraft, Mackie, Yamaha, the DL3 and TF.
And the DM3 as well. He recently added that, and so I've got that. I've got a DM3. In our
unlimited
stock
DCAs because he can just make it up, like he's controlling everything.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's the other thing is you can just go and go, well, I'm going to put a bunch of other things in here.
How's this for super geeky as well? I can't remember the term of the function, and it is where you want to change the gain structure and shift up your faders at the same time. So think about this: you want to shift your faders down,
right,
and compensate by bringing the gain up. There's a function to do that on desks that don't have
right,
a function
because you're basically abstracting. I think this is the power of a lot of these things is once you start to abstract the controls from the core asset of the you're able to just go, well, I can make a bunch of things up, and that's what I've always I've been looking at a lot of what's the next generation of what I want to use for audio, and a lot of the software audio it's been really hard to get me out of using hardware, but one of the things about it is that what I love about this is the idea of I'm going to take a hardware engine, but I'm going to have all the flexibility of a software controller, and then I can build an interface that looks the way I want it to look. And I think that's
it's game changing. I mean, you can just get a rough idea. Look how tall those faders are, right? Which gives me amazing resolution when I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing. Whereas compared to the built-in or the standard Behringer app, they were half the size. They're half the size because they had all this extra meter bridge and stuff that was going on.
Debris.
I just got rid of all of that. Yeah, and now if I want an EQ, or compressor curve, I tap it and come back out. And so this also runs on PC, and people have created some really cool big touchscreen systems, and you can link them as well, which is amazing too. So you can have two instances of it going and link the screens together. So now if you touch on a EQ or a compression, it'll pop up on a secondary screen, and you've still got all of your faders. And so people do these setups with two 24-inch touch screens. They put a flat one and one sitting up, and it just looks like a full console.
I have to admit that
just running a little thing.
I've been playing with touchscreens for a variety of reasons, and the problem that I have is that if you have an iPad, when you touch a touchscreen, you're like, what's wrong here? Like, it's like a broken iPad. Like all touchscreens are like broken iPads. You're like, I got so hard and it's so slow and low resolution. So a lot of when I think about custom interfaces, I've been kind of wrapped around my iPads because I'm just kind of like the quality of the the quality and resolution of the touch is so much better. Because they're making lots of them. They're making more iPads than they are those monitors, and so it makes it easier. So it's interesting. Let's go to the next question.
Next question's coming in from Lois Richter in Davis, California. And she asks, how do actual hearing aids, which have your computer going directly into your ear, compare to your AirPods?
Good, Carl.
So hearing aids, that let's say they're $2,000, $3,000, they're static. So they have a static curve. So what that means is you actually have to go to an audistician. The audistician has a fancy computer that talks to the hearing aid. You do the hearing test, and it will put into that hearing aid the correct curve to fix your deficiencies, your biological deficiencies. So essentially it's static. It's quite powerful because it's doing real-time EQ, it's listening to the real world, and it's re-amplifying it for your ear, and it's putting that curve correctly. It's not exactly a one-to-one curve what you hear, because our ears are a little bit weird because it's not exactly like a machine. So if you try to get a machine to do this, it won't work. But a human ear, that's why you have to do the test, and you need to be honest when you do the test. It's costing you $3,000. You're not going to be dishonest, I guess. But what's happening with the AirPod Pro, and so it's static. And so what can happen is you can send Bluetooth to a hearing aid, modern hearing aids. It will just send a normal Bluetooth signal that I would get, anyone else would get, and then it's applying a curve, essentially like an EQ, but it's a little bit more high quality than an EQ. But essentially it's like a LUT, but an audio LUT. That's kind of a good way of putting it. What's happening with the AirPod Pro has a computer inside of it. It has a H2 computer inside of it, and this is a full computer. And so what it can do is you can do the hearing test, and then it can actually generate the curve. You don't need to plug it into this huge PC at the audistician's office. It will generate the curve based on the hearing test you're going to do on an iPhone or an iPad. So the iPhone and the iPad will put out tones, and then you say what tones you hear. Can you hear this one loud? Is this one softer? It's all this relative. So you go through the hearing test, and then it will send the curve to the AirPods, and that's it. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to go back in and make an appointment with the audistician to redo the curve a year later or 6 months later, because you do have to do that if your hearing is starting to change. With this, you just simply take the test again on your iPhone or your iPad, and then it'll send a new curve to the AirPods Pro 2. So only AirPods Pro 2 is the only device that does this right now. But that's kind of what's happening, and it's not dynamic. So it's not going to dynamically change. Well, it does dynamically change, because it can also do. Not only can the AirPod Pro 2 do hearing aid mode, which is applying this curve, it can also do noise reduction. So it can actually get rid of the noise, then feed the noise reduced signal to the hearing aid part. So it's kind of like let's give the hearing aid part a lot better quality signal. Then it's applying the curve to that, rather than applying the curve to all the noise as well. So I think it's going to be the only thing that people may not like about this is not inconspicuous. So people who want to be conspicuous, I think the Apple approach that's the only thing going against it for people who want to be conspicuous about a hearing aid. Other than that, it's a pretty big win for Apple, especially because
no one will know. Like, it's just going to get to a point where people have headphones in all the time, and no one knows whether you're listening or not listening. Like, it's just going to be an entirely. I think the one of the big advantages of the AirPods for a long time is I could put them in. Sometimes I put them in. They're nice and bright and white, and even if their batteries are dead, I'd put them in, and that was like my way of saying, "Hey, don't talk to me." I don't want to. I'm not here to have a conversation. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, that's when you've got nothing playing. You've got them in transparency mode, and someone says, "Can you hear me?" And you're like, "Oh, I can't hear you." It's like, I can hear you fine. Yeah. I think that the big thing for me is I think you should try it if you can. And I know it's much harder to try hearing aids and then just take them back and say no thanks. But there is a thing. I think it comes from two different angles. Whereas the AirPods Pro have been all about high resolution audio for music listening, and then all these extra features. Whereas the hearing aid is about hearing and particularly about focusing on speech. And yes, it's people connecting to their phones and listening to music and podcasts or whatever. But if they were like better for music but not so great for speech, people would be complaining all the time that their hearing aids aren't that great and I can't hear when people are talking to me. So they're focusing specifically on speech, whereas the AirPods are more than that. The other thing I'd mention is that, particularly coming into the holiday season, lots of people don't know that the return policy, I mean, it's different in America anyway, I think, generally, but the return policy in the holiday season is amazing, because you can buy anything from an Apple store around about mid-November, I think it is, and then not return it until mid-January. And so I did this when the iPad 12 came out. I couldn't afford it. Bought it mid-November, tested around, did a few shows with it, and then returned it just after New Year's. And it was fun because that's what their holiday return policy is. So buy some AirPods Pro, play around with them, and the problem is you will likely fall in love with them and not ever want to return them. So
yeah, that's Apple's bet, is that you're probably
exactly.
not. And where I live, it is I ordered my AirPod Pros, and I ordered them at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And one of the windows for 10 o'clock in the morning was to drop them off at 11:30 a.m. at my house in a little bag. And I was just like, what? It would take me longer to drive to the Apple store, buy it, and bring it back than to have Apple just drop it off at my house.
So we have that now with a big box store called JB Hi-Fi in Australia, and on iPhone 16 release day, I'd waited up and I'd locked in my order as soon as I could for my iPhone 16. On the day, I went onto this big box store,
yeah,
and I'm like, iPhone 16. They're like, yep, and they got a deal with Uber, and it was literally like, okay, yep, I want to buy that, and put it in an Uber and send it to me. And it was about an hour, so it's very similar to. And so we ended up getting another one for a colleague, and so he got his before I got mine. I had to go and line up at the Apple store. Thankfully, there was 30 people in the line as well when I picked up my iPhone 16. There was 30 people in the line ahead of me, and thankfully, a guy came down the line, and I just said to him, "Hey, I don't need to do anything. I don't need anyone to set anything up. I've got no questions. Right. I don't want to buy any accessories. I literally just want to pick up like I normally would anything else." He's like, "Yeah, come through." So I bypassed everyone. They brought it out. They gave it to me. I walked out. That was a massive hack.
I thought you were going to pull him aside and go, "Do you know who I am? Do you
That's right.
You know who I am?"
I know Alex Lindsay. Like, Alex Lindsay's a friend of mine. So it would pay for you to look after me.
I always think about, when I think about buying anything in Australia, I've told the story before, so I have to declare it anytime around Grant that I might have told a story before. But I just think about, every time I go to an Apple store, I think about the socks. I bought these. I bought the socks at the Gap and told them I didn't need a bag, and so now I'm walking around with 3 pairs of socks at the Apple store, buying, like, I don't know, some adapter, and it's a hard drive, and someone walks over and just goes, "You look exactly like this guy that's named Alex Lindsay." And all I could say was, I get that a lot. And then I left. It's just like,
I get that at home all the time. All the time.
No, I just get that a lot, because I was like, I have 3 pairs of socks in my hand. I was like, it was too weird. It's too weird. Anyway, if you're listening and you're listening to this and you're in Sydney, I apologize that I just walked away. I just said that and walked away. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, that's awesome. You're talking about a time, when everyone's going to be walking around with AirPods in all the time. I've been living that life with these bone conduction headphones, for the past few years. And I wake up, I put them on, I kind of forget they're on, and sometimes people are talking to me, and it's whether I'm hitting pause or not to speak with them, but they're always in transparency mode, right?
Yeah,
because their ears are open. But
Grant has them, Guy has them. I have 5 pairs. I have 2 of the older ones, 2 of the newer ones, and then I have the swimming one, because I swim with them.
Yeah. So someone on Office Hours said the other day that they shower with them.
You could. I don't know why I would do that. I don't know if I don't shower long enough to care, but I swim with them, and it's transformational. Like, I swim for half an hour, and
But I don't think they had the swim ones. I think they had like these ones.
Oh, the regular. You probably could, but I don't think I would. Here's the
this
problem.
Model is water resistant. The ones that I'm wearing, they're not the swimming ones. They're not the waterproof, but these are water resistant. They certainly get splashed on.
When you swim, I did try it in Bluetooth. Bluetooth doesn't carry through water very well. So if there's probably some version. If you swim like Butterfly or something, you're probably okay. But if you swim a freestyle, which tends to be what I swim, your head's under water enough that you lose the signal pretty quick. So it goes off every time you go down, but you hear it every time your head comes up to take, to take a breath. So every either 1 or 2 or 3 stroke or 4 strokes that you have, depending on what pattern you're doing, you get to hear it when you come up for breath, and then then disappears as soon as your head goes back down in the water. So you put it in MP3 mode, and it just loops, whatever you put in the folder. It just loops that all the time. So I've got songs I like to listen to when I'm swimming, and that's what I listen to.
The reason I bring these up is there's actually 2 things related to hearing aids for these. The reason I first got into bone conduction is because I had hearing loss in one ear from having a ruptured eardrum, and it would heal and rupture again. And I couldn't hear out of one ear, and I was in getting a hearing test, and they do these different things. And one of the tests they did was a bone conduction test, right? They put these sensor on, and it was like, holy mackerel, all of a sudden I could hear through bone conduction. So it was just the ear canal, it was just the eardrum that was causing the problem. So I could hear at a bone conduction when I couldn't at a regular. And the other things that they let me do at the time was I could put my phone at the front of the room, and it would listen to the conversation and transmit via Bluetooth, right? So I'm getting a hearing aid function from across the room, right? So it's not a common use case, but every now and then because when you have hearing loss, crowded spaces are the most difficult, right? So being able to kind of get the microphone close to the source and listen through it. So for what it's worth, they were useful. Luckily, my hearing has been corrected. It was fixed and I can hear again. But
it's interesting that Apple is kind of cornering the 2 ends of the spectrum in this area, in the use of the iPhone and all the Apple products. If you're over 50, there are so many of these health things that have become more important to you. For most of us that have gone over 50, there's more and more of these. I mean, at 65 or 70, everyone's using an iPad. Like, it's just like, like no one's using, very few people I see using a computer. At under 18 in the United States, at least, the penetration is 87% are using iPhones, of kids. And so they seem to have that. And then the middle is kind of slowly getting squeezed, but the outsides, they seem, and it's because they've really focused, you can tell they've really focused on the things that are important. For the under 18, they focused on green bubbles. I mean, my kids are like, that's no joke. Like the green bubble, you do not, as a high school student, nobody wants green bubbles. Like it's not something that is okay, and over 50, there's all these health things. Like I practically, to me, like walking or swimming without my watch on, it's like kind of like it didn't count. like I have to make sure it's charged all the time so I can get my steps. Anyway, next question.
I was just going to say, Alex, I was just going to say, you need to get like a little floating holder for your phone, and then just have a little tether to you, and it just floats along behind you, nice and close in the pool, and it keeps you nice and close to Bluetooth. You'd be fine then.
It turns out I can just put this thing on MP3 mode, and it's got a little hard drive, and it's good enough.
It doesn't look as cool though. I'd like to see a little phone just bobbing along behind you.
I don't know if that would look cooler. I'm just saying that that may have the opposite
cool,
effect.
not it.
Like cool might not be the answer there.
A little swan, a little blow up swan that's holding your phone.
Swan, I'm pulling along in the public lap pool. That would be. I think that they might have to talk to me after that, and they'd be like, I think you can swim here. Like I don't. No, you can't. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next one, Ray Maxwell, Vancouver, BC, and he asks, "What are your thoughts on the immersive production Submerged?"
Did you see it yet, Grant?
No. So while we were docked at Ellie Beach just 2 days ago, I quickly got on 5G and downloaded it so that I'm ready to go.
Did you download it? I was having trouble downloading it. It didn't show up as an option. It did show up as an option for you to download it.
So the trick with that is you have to click and hold to get a sub menu, and you get the download. But it's like 12 gig or 15 gig or something. It must be like a gig a minute or something. It's
so much resolution, so much frame rate. And it's only 17. Probably why they made it 17 minutes is like a gig a minute. So they weren't ready to fill. Like they'd be like, well, if we do 2 hours, some people might not even be able to fill it, put it on their actual
And it'll
device.
be $1 million a minute for production as well, probably too, right?
I think it was. I think it was $1
Mm.
million a minute. If I was going to guess, it's an incredibly intricate set and that has to do a lot of effects. So when you mix the two, this thing has to hold water, literally, and we have to build it, and we want it to be totally realistic, and it has to hold up at every angle. Super complicated thing to build. So I'm guessing that the set itself, that one area with the tubes, is probably $3 or $4 million at least, just to build that by itself, and maybe more. And so that's probably what set the pace for it. And I think that, my opinion is, I mean, they did a lot of things. They did a lot of things that were great. They did some things that I wouldn't do. They did some things that I wouldn't do that I thought was impressive. Like, it surprised me. Like, so there was definitely, so the the close-ups I don't think work at all. Like, it's uncomfortable and weird. And it feels, so I don't think that the close-ups work, but we've never thought close-ups work, and that didn't change my mind. That it felt like old-fashioned filmmaking. It's, it felt like new wine in old wineskins. Like, it just didn't fit. And so I think that part didn't work. The wide shots in the end, it's okay. Like, it's fine. Like, you have to tell a story. The medium shots in the torpedo room and in the everything else was just stunning. Just the best 3D, the best spatial video I've ever seen. Like, it is, the resolution's high. The frame, we've always dealt with all these compromises. The resolution isn't high enough. The frame rate isn't high enough. There's all these things that, just don't work. And it really felt like, for the first time, I don't think we were 100% there, but we were 90-95%, when the rest of everything I've seen before that was like 40-50%. Like, suddenly it was just like, wow, like they're just, that it's incredible. And I do think that um, there's another language, and I don't think that they spoke it perfectly. It's kind of like broken spatial, is what they spoke. It was better than, when people talk to me and they go, sorry, my English is very good. I'm like, it's always better than your Swahili, like, because or my Swahili, it's better than my Swahili, because I don't know how to speak that. So I felt like they had kind of broken spatial, where they got a lot of it right. I think that there's a human scale that 180-degree spatial wants to be at. It wants to be at a comfortable distance from somebody, at that where you're standing or sitting or wherever it would make sense for you to be, and you're experiencing the story. And I think that's different than a filmmaking. I think it's different than filmmaking the way we think of it. We're not cutting all these things. We're creating something. Like, one of the things that we did when we had Ozos is we had a stage play, and we went from scene to scene to scene in the stage play, and we put the camera exactly where is the best view of that scene. Don't move it. We're not cutting. You just get to sit on stage, or sometimes off stage. But we watched the play a couple times and designed where that camera needed to be to do each step. And I just thought, oh, this is the future. Like, this is going to be a whole different thing. But we haven't seen that kind of thing very often. And the cutting, I think, actually worked better than I expected to. They cut around and gave you some other views. And during a scene, they had, the thing that surprised me the most was, one of the things that most of us won't do is move the camera, because it makes people very uncomfortable. When you move the camera and they have 180-degree, people get, and they did it to make you uncomfortable. Like it was a purposeful, I'm going to move this camera really fast, and you're going to feel it. And then I'm going to move it again, and you're going to feel it. And that creates this urgency in your body. And I've just never had a movie that created urgency in your body by doing something with the camera in that way. And so it was a very interesting experience. I think this medium is going to be huge. Like, I just think that it's going to, like, I think that this headset is the most expensive, largest version of what we're seeing as this headset gets smaller. But, Apple is a big company, and we're in year 10 of a 20-year business plan. Like, and so, they're, this is nothing's going to slow down, from Apple. and I definitely think we as media artists have to pay very close attention to what's happening and try to get in to early and understand this language, because it's going to be a huge opportunity. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Do we know what camera it was shot on? What submetric was it shot on? The Blackmagic, or was it shot on the Canon R5C?
So it was shot on. We don't know. We don't know what it was shot on. There are theories that it was shot on Blackmagic sensors that weren't necessarily, so not Apple, among other people, is rumored to be tearing these Blackmagic cameras apart, because the Blackmagic camera has the most flexible substructure. So the frame rates, the resolutions, there's a whole bunch of things that Blackmagic's way more flexible than all the other options, and they're less expensive. So if you're going to tear apart a Venice, it costs more money. Ripping apart 12Ks, and it seems to be that a lot of people have been going after these 12K sensors, and that's what they've been kind of grabbing onto, and they tear the whole camera apart. If you open up an Ursa, by the way, there's not a lot there. Like, it's a pretty empty box. It's more of the buttons and the form factor is what's there. So they've been repackaging them, again, Apple's not the only one doing that repackaging, and so it looks like Apple then went to Blackmagic and said, "Hey, here's what we don't want to be a camera. We have a camera. It's called an iPhone, and that's the only camera we are going to spend money on, because it sells 75 million copies, a quarter or whatever. But if we're going to sell 2,000 or 5,000 units or 10,000 units, Apple can't figure out how to get their hand in that little box. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? The rumor is they handed it off to Blackmagic. Blackmagic is now, they showed them what they were doing. Blackmagic will make one, probably the second or third. The first generation will be great. It'll be what Apple thought was great. By the second or third generation, it'll probably be a mixture of what Apple thought, and Blackmagic will get their head around it. But the big advantage is that Blackmagic is going to have the camera, but more importantly, they have the post-production system as well. So they have Resolve, with the camera, with all the telemetry that the camera is going to hand to Resolve and everything else, and owning the camera, especially here, and the post-production process is going to be super powerful. And I think that it's going to really streamline the process that we've had so far. And I'm more excited about that camera than I've been excited about anything in 10 years. I'm just waiting for that camera to roll out and to start shooting with it, because I think it's just going to be an amazing experience. Go ahead, Grant.
Ray, your question about the movie Submerged. Given that I'm on a cruise at the moment, I've just been a little reluctant to watch a movie about being submerged, and I figure maybe I'll wait till I'm on dry land before I watch that.
I used to always watch plane crash movies on my laptop.
On the planes.
Here's the worst part: is I used to love to do it if I was sitting in the middle seat and I would open up some plane crash and watch the whole movie. And I got better about not doing that, because I think I would screw people. Because people would look over and there's like planes going everywhere. I thought it was fun because you're in the plane. How much more fun can it be if you're like in the plane and you're watching a plane going down? Yeah.
Well, how much better is it now with the Vision Pro, knowing that you can just kind of watch, or have anything sort of a confidential, client work on your screen or something, if you're doing like a Mac virtual display. That sort of stuff is just amazing now. It works so well.
I have to admit, all I watch is movies.
Yeah, right.
I just when I'm on a plane, the thing that for me is interesting, I think I've said it before, is that my eyesight, for whatever reason, glasses and prescriptions and all these other things, the sharpest world that I live in is the Apple Vision Pro. Like, it is tack sharp for me all the time. And when I take it off, the rest of the world all the time is just a little out of focus. Like, it's just not quite, and whatever reason, now looking through the Apple Vision Pro is blurry. But what I mean by that is when I watch movies, I can tell you the difference in the film grain. I can, and it is. And by the way, the resolution and frame rate, it makes a huge difference in submerged. It's interesting. Next question.
Next one's in from John, California, and Heflin, Alabama, and he asks, looking to upgrade the lighting in my home office studio, what types of lights do you use? What type of light rigs do you use?
Good money.
I have found that lighting is one of the areas where I wish I would have listened to the buy once, cry once theory. It is the largest pile of stuff I have in my closet is cheap lighting that I've then upgraded. So where I've landed, what I've learned is two things. First of all, we're in a really great position right now with Aperture's Amaran line. And so my main key light from a quality and value standpoint, I think Amaran lights can't be beat. So my key light is an Amaran. The second lesson I've learned is that there is a line of smart light bulbs by Philips. They're not Philips Hue, and I don't recommend Philips Hue, but they're called Philips Whiz. And the thing about the Philips Whiz bulbs is each one can connect to Wi-Fi. The Philips Hue, you need a hub and more infrastructure. The Philips Whiz bulbs, each of them can connect to your network by itself. But the light bulbs are like $12 for a bicolor and like $15 for a full color. So most of the other lights around me are like simple paint light fixtures, a little dome light with a smart light bulb in it that I can set to be different colors, like the paper lantern over in the corner. It's a smart light bulb in there that can make any color. The other line of lights that I've come to like a lot. So I said Amaran. So this light back here behind me is an Amaran, P90C, right? So it's full color. I can set a backdrop, whatever color I want. But and that's another Amaran on a stand behind me. But these panel lights that's over here, and there's one up here as well. The Elgato Key Light and Key Light Air, I found for a relatively simple mid level light panel light, the Elgato lights to be great value, great quality. They're a little expensive, but they have great control. The thing I found with them, and the caveat I'll tell you, is that, and all of these lights, the Amaran ecosystem works with the Aperture Sidus Link, but there's also a brand new Amaran app that works both on your phone and on PC and Mac. There's a PC and Mac app just for Amaran that's brand new. All of these systems have an app on your phone. What I find with the Elgato lights, though, is the app where you can connect it to your computer, it just hasn't been stable for me for one reason or another. When I try and set it up and operate it through a Stream Deck, I always need to fiddle with the software on the computer. The phone connection to the Aperture light or to the Elgato light seems to be okay. But for one reason, I don't know why, because it's supposed to be Wi-Fi connectivity rather than Bluetooth. But anyway, that's my caveat. Amaran and Philips Whiz are the kind of takeaways for me.
Go ahead, Carl.
So lighting is pretty much what I do most of the time as a photographer. For continuous light, actually for all my lighting, for flash and for continuous, I've chosen Godox. So we're all in the Guangdong province here. So Aperture, Godox are literally across the road from each other in Guangdong, in Shenzhen, and Nanlight's just down the road. It's about an hour's drive, but they're all in the same province. So all the three big lighting, they all came from it differently as well. Aperture has a really interesting start with Ian. It's a single guy. Godox came from Flash in the 90s, so they did Flash stuff. And Nanlight came from industrial lighting, like for factories and stuff, so overhead high bay lighting. And when they transitioned to LED. So any of these three brands I recommend, but I personally use Godox. The one that I have on me right now, so this is kind of important that I say that, what I'm actually using. These are the eSports. So essentially these are panel light. They're bicolor panel lights, 45 watts. They come with the telescoping arm here. They're very high quality, but the main thing about these is the remote. So the remote for them attaches to the back. This is it. So if I turn it on, there's the remote on. So I can change everything. I can change 100 of these lights with this one remote. So I can have the lights in different banks, so different groups. So I can say, okay, group E, I want you to be this brightness and this color. I want, and so, but they're only bicolor for these ones. Godox, of course, you can give Godox $7,000 for a single light if you want. So if you go up to their no LED series, Godox have very high-end cinema stuff that is designed for rental houses. So yeah, $7,000 for one light from Godox. If you want to go that high, and they're now Arri's sky panels are now kind of being threatened because Godox has put up. Now these panels are like half the price of a sky panel, so they're not exactly like a tenth of the price. They're half the price of a sky panel, a new sky panel, which is like 6,000. Godox versions are 3,000 for their large panel lights you'll see on cinema. But go to the Godox website, go to the continuous lighting stuff, stay away from the no LED stuff unless you want to spend thousands of dollars, and take a look at what they've got. They've got broadcast lights which have no fans. So if you want absolutely silent lights, they've got 2 series with no fans in them. Their broadcast lights have no fans. They have panel lights and Fresnels. These are no fans. They're designed for grid, so you go, where's the power cord? Doesn't come with a power cord because it's designed for a grid, so it's designed for an install. They do have stand-mounted versions that do come with a power cord if you want them. But yeah, so these ES 45s, I would suggest them first. I also have LC30s. If you want a hard light, they can be modified, so it has magnetic modifiers. They're the 2 I'd suggest to start with. Once you go, these are $115 from B&H, the panel light I showed. The ES 30s, which are a hard light, if you want a hard spotlight, which is like for a hair light or, kind of, people just want hard lighting where you don't necessarily want to put in a softbox. ES 30s, these are 30 watts, but they are 9,000 lux. So they're really bright because they have a Fresnel, they have a built-in Fresnel in their system. Well, it's actually a built-in lens in their system. And they're, I think, about $70, $60, $70 on B&H for, you can buy them in kits, the 2 kit. So that's my suggestion as a starting point. Go into a whole second hour, obviously, if we keep on going, but I choose Godox, but I think Aperture and Amaran and Nanlite and Nanlux, those 3 brands, you can't go wrong. They're all stealing features from each other, which is great because they're all pushing each other. And so I think the as far as the apps are concerned, Godox has probably got the edge now because they've got the No LED app. If you go into the No LED app and just watch videos about No LED app, and you will go, that's kind of crazy. We're kind of getting into volume, what the volume does as far as you can map lighting. So you can have 6 panels around you and you can map colors. Essentially, they're actually in pixel mode. So it's not as high resolution, of course, as the volume, because the volume is thousands or millions and millions of pixels. This is, you can have essentially all your lights hooked up to the No LED app, and each of them is a pixel. And you can say, okay, I want this color. Essentially go to videos. It's hard to explain because it is essentially a very baby version of a volume. As far as you can have light on one side and another, and someone turns around. So rather than turning around, you can actually turn the volume around. Kind of crazy. But yeah, so my suggestion would be the ES45 and the LC30 as a starting point for one hard light and one's a panel kind of soft light. Beyond that, the world's your oyster. Stick to the 3 big brands, I would suggest. So stick to the Aperture family of brands, the Nanlite family of brands, and the Godox family of brands. The reason why is because accessories for them and the apps for them will get better and better because more people are buying them. And because they're all competing with each other. They all come from the same province, so there's maybe a little bit of industrial espionage between them because people kind of move jobs between them. So they're taking maybe some ideas from one company to another because they just walk across the road and get a job across the competition. But those 3 providers from China are quite amazing. As far as how to set them up, start watching YouTube videos be careful of YouTube videos where they talk about brands and brands are better. That's not true because obviously all the components from these are coming from third parties. A lot of the components anyway, coming from third parties, no third party providers like the actual LEDs themselves. None of these companies actually make the LEDs. They're actually coming from specialist, manufacturers that make LEDs and then ship them out in volume. And then these guys actually do the surface mount. They do that stuff, and they do the software and all that. But the actual LEDs are all coming from probably 1 or 2 providers in the same area. So if you hear advice saying, "Oh, stick to this brand, not this brand," unless they're getting, YouTube channels, of course, do get endorsements. They get free gear, so they may talk about it. Aperture's very heavy with this. Aperture loves giving away free, and Amaran especially. Amaran is really designed for content creators, and they made that brand intentionally to give free stuff away. Nanlite and Godox, I think Godox gives more flash equipment away than continuous lights, I've noticed. So I see more influencers getting freebies is from Godox is more in the flash world rather than the continuous light. Nanlite, as I said, they came from industrial, so they actually started with some really big lights, and they've kind of come down to smaller lights, and now they've gone back up to big lights for Hollywood stuff. So Nan has those kind of Hollywood, well, they're all 3 of them kind of have Hollywood lights, but really Nan, Aperture, and Godox have kind of bifurcated. They've kind of gone and pushed the high end really high into like $5,000-$6,000 lights, and then they've got their low end lights, which start at like 50 up to probably, I'd say, 1,000. Once you're over 1,000, you're really into what we would call, you're going from Amaran to Aperture. Once you hit that $1,000 barrier, I'll use that as an example. In Godox world, it would be going from just the Godox brand to the No LED brand within Godox. and then you've got NAND Lux and NAND Light on the other side. But my suggestion is look at the price. It doesn't matter which brand. I would say for a panel light, $200 is the maximum you want to spend, and for a point source light, maybe $100, $150 for kind of like a COB, if you want a point source light. That's it. Start there, because if you're upgrading, and then think about power and rigging. How you're going to have it rigged, unless you want to have light stands every time you set up. Rigging is another thing. So how you're actually going to hang the lights and power the lights. That's the other thing you want to think about.
Good guy.
Yeah, a lot of it was well covered by the guys. I have a couple of the lights that they mentioned. One thing to think about is, are you going to take this stuff on the road? So if it's going to just sit there, then you're probably going to be looking at larger, cheaper instruments, whereas something like these popular LED mats, so like this one, sorry, getting echo, but the egg crates on these really help shape the light. So I'm able to have soft light that is directional, which is very tough to do when you're dealing with the cheap stuff. And like the P60 that Mike has, if you throw the egg crate on that, it cuts the light probably 50%. So it makes it almost worthless. So a couple of the lines to look at, as Carl mentioned, the light dome. Let me check. Let's see, that's 4. So the light dome here, they come in various sizes. You know, you could go monstrous. Like I've had the 6-foot version of these light domes with the egg crate, and I mean, that's head to toe soft light. It's amazing. This is what they'll bring in on CEO Fortune 500. You know, they want to get the magazine cover look. So this is a baby one, but you can see that you could pair like this Octodome with this Amaran 150. And I think the bulbs in some of these are less, they're not as color accurate. So the CRI is not as high on the Amaran line versus the Aperture line. So you get into the more towards 95 or 90, 98 on the CRI. This is the other one that I have that I pack around. Actually, it's this one, the F22X. It's about as large as this one that you see that I just cut to. And the nice thing is that for travel, this runs off V-mount batteries. It folds out and breaks down very tight, and it has the egg crate with it. So I take a look again, just depending on what you're doing. If you want to go cheap, go Amaran with the Octodome. If you want to go a little more money, go with the larger Aperture light, which not quite the LS600, but like a 120D would be where I'd be looking. Or yeah, that a 600 would probably be too much for what you're doing. But keep in mind that these are all dimmable, so you could collapse them down. And the thing about that contamination that I'm talking about, if I turn off these lights, I mean, you can see that my blue is still pretty blue, whereas, and that's because I'm shaping this light, and then I have a hard light that's hitting my hair, and that creates that sheen around the edge, so that helps separate me. And I don't really have too much on my shoulder because I'm wearing a black shirt, but you can see my hand because it is reflective. If I was wearing a white shirt, I would have more of an outline here, which is very helpful. And you can't get that with these soft lights. You need a hard directional light. So this is a light by Felix, and you can jump on their website, spelled Filex. And we dropped by their booth at Infocom, and they had some. Actually, this is one of those lights. Just for a second, you could see kind of the 50-50 look. So I'm modeling the light. I'm shaping the light. So you don't want your key and your field to be 100 per 100, like 100%, 100%. So 100%, 100%. You want it maybe 80 and 100, so there's a differentiation there, and you're creating that 3D look. So there's more to lighting than just throwing a couple lights up and calling it a day. You could really craft. And when you watch feature films, that's all it's about. It's about shaping that lighting and softening that lighting and making the person look as good as they can.
I went pretty cheap. I have for me, I just got I think I've shown this before, but this is, you know, this is my setup, so you can kind of see what that looks like, and then up, and that is you know, and that one, something fell while I was gone, so you can see that one light hotspot is there. But generally what that is that's a 5-foot by 3-foot soft, you know, softbox. Like it's so basically that is some EMT rail, which cost me a total of $10, and the diffusion cost me about $15, and then the little pieces of it, you know, the maker pipe costs about another 10. So, and then I just put any lights I want put back there. Right now I've got some old Nan light 68s, and I don't even think I think they're just the 56 100 ones because they're really cheap. They were selling them off at like $90 each or something like that. And so I just throw them behind there. And as I pull them back a little bit, as I said, something fell while I was gone. So it's kind of against it at the moment. But as you pull it back away, the whole thing just kind of softens out. And if anything, the next version, I'm about to rotate my set, and I'll turn this into 5x7. And you know how much what the price change is going to be? Nothing. Like, I mean, it was going to cost me $40 to go to 5x7 from 3x5 because I'm just going to buy some more EMT. I actually have EMT rail just sitting over there with maker pipe sitting over here. So all I have to do is buy a bigger sheet of diffusion for $15, and I'll have a bigger light source than I had before. Because my background's so far back, and I want it to look natural. I don't want it to have a specific color. I just let it bleed through because I don't care. Like I just don't care about so it just kind of, and then I do have another 68 right here that is just above my head. And that does exactly, you can see the kind of as I go through here. And I wanted it to actually be kind of just soft on my head. And it's turned as low as it goes before it turns off. And to Guy's point, it does make a big difference. Like I see just a little bit of separation that doesn't occur if I don't have it there. So, I can't control it remotely, and I can't change the colors, and I can't do any of those things. I just don't do those things. Like I can change the colors of the ones that are punching my back wall. I have some mix panels, some nanlite mix panels. Those are DMX, and I can do whatever I want with those. But that's the only one I care about. So I do think that there's some point where I'm going to switch everything to DMX just to have fun, and make more of an expression process. But I don't. But for if someone asks me what to do, it's that big source. There's nothing better to make you look better is just a big light source. So just make it big. I don't try. I don't try to control it too much because I'm not trying to do a film. I just want a big soft light. It tends to fix a lot of problems with our skin, and especially as you get older, and you can see Guys is big and soft there, and again, what I challenge myself to, and this is like with twine connecting it, I'm going to make it look nicer the next time. It was like me, I was going to throw it up, but I was like, eventually I'm just going to do this to see how it looks. And that was like a year and a half ago, so. Go ahead, Grant.
One more thing on the rigging real quick. I just want to point out that that's an auto pull there, and these are really handy for being able to not use light stands that spread across. So I have a light stand over here that's, the legs are all over the place, whereas these auto pulls are pretty sweet to just clamp a big old softbox onto. Yeah, and
I built a grid with the EMT rail, with maker pipe. So there's like a 10x10 square above me that is just the grid. I wouldn't recommend doing that because I wouldn't recommend it in public. I use it. It's all been fine. But if there was an earthquake, I would get out of this room as fast as I can. Like it's all bending just a little bit, holding all the things that I put in it. So I'm always like, oh, this was a horrible idea, but it's been fine for a year and a half. My next set, which I almost pulled the trigger on recently, is to put speed rail in. So I'm going to put 1.5 inches. The next version of this will be 1.5 inches speed rail with 3 foot, and I could probably climb up on top of it, to be there, but it's going to be the whole room. The reason I need to move to speed rail is because I can't span the room with EMT rail. Like it would bend a lot, and the speed rail will be very rigid. And so, and I've had that in my old studios in the past. And so once that happens, to Guy's point, there's no stands, but it also means every a 3 foot square I just go up into the ceiling and grab onto stuff, and realign it. And so I'm going to put it at a 10 foot, there's a line of demarcation in my room where they're at 10 feet where it changes structure. So at 10 feet, I'm just going to have this roof that I can attach things to. So that's another step to that. Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
It's a good question, John, and clearly something that we all have something to talk about. But the last thing I would encourage you to consider is how comfortable your space is. Sometimes we can make the best lighting and you've just got this bright light in your face the whole day. And so it's finding a balance on that. And one of the compromises I made with that, I took Carl's recommendation and got the Godox and the eSports version. I really like them. I run them at 2600 because I just prefer the warm light on me rather than daylight, and so I make the adjustment in my camera And arguably, I might be able to get a slightly better look by going to 5600, but I prefer the look. I prefer the warm light in my space. And so it's just something to consider is you've got to spend a lot of time in there. You want to make it really comfortable. And it's one of the things with those big soft boxes is that it's not as focused light on you, and it's a little bit more comfortable to sit in there all day. So it's just something to consider.
It was dramatically more comfortable for me to put this big square up than it was, and then turn the, it's really thick diffusion, and then I turned down the lights, and so now it's really soft, and I got a camera that is a little faster, so the the Sony FX30 is, doesn't need a lot, so it doesn't need a lot of light, and so, and it really, I mean, once I did it, I was like, I don't even know what I was thinking before. I also have, what I have going all the way around is sound blankets, and those I got black and white ones, white on one side, black on the other, so I can control it. But I just have all white, so I've got this kind of, there's a soft box, but I'm also just surrounded by white, which kind of fills in a lot as well. And so, so those are the things to, but I do think about bounce. Like I have a cutting mat that is like kind of like my table mat. It's gray, it's light gray. I don't want as much bounce. I didn't want it to be white coming up, but I also didn't want to have it black and have it suck all the stuff in. And I definitely didn't want blue. You don't want, you want to think about what's around you and make sure that it's some kind of neutral color of the objects, those tablecloths, whatever makes a difference. And you'll start bouncing stuff into you, and you can't figure out why you're blue, or why you're red or why you're orange, because you have something in your reflective areas that affect that. It is important. One last thing, you'll want to turn your lights down, but remember that you want them powerful enough that if I change things on my monitor, you don't see it on my face. So you can turn that light so low that people can see that in a meeting. And sometimes it's distracting because they feel like you're doing something else. You might be researching something, you might be downloading their file, there might be whatever. But I always make sure that I'm conscious to how much light is going in. So if I change structure, if I change what's on my screens, you don't see a bunch of flashing on my face, because I have turned my lights down enough that it still looked fine on camera, but I was getting enough light from my monitors that was made it more problematic. Go ahead, Muddy.
Yeah, the last thing I would say as you were describing that, the other thing that occurred to me is advice I often give for people that have glasses. Positioning of the lights is super important as well to help. And so, my rule of thumb is 45 degrees over and 45 degrees up helps reduce the glare on my glasses. You don't see it unless I, look towards the lights, and then you see it. But position of light is just as important as, the other things we're talking about.
And usually a lot of times I'm putting light straight in front of people because it's kind of like a broadcast. The broadcast approach is always to have a flat light on someone so that when you put everybody together on a super source, they all look the same. So usually if someone comes in with at an angle or something else, I've sat in the control. The only reason I do it is, you get caught up in things. I've sat in the control room when someone comes in and they've got this kind of film and the whole control room goes, oh, we have a filmmaker here. Oh, and they make fun of them the whole time, the whole show. So, I will admit that has suppressed my willingness to do anything other than a straight on, lighting. And so but what I do a lot of times is, pull it up. I pull it up until I can still see the light in your iris, and if I can't see it, then I pull it down a little bit. And that I find that getting up there, number one, is the light in your iris looks really nice. So you want to have that little highlight there. And it also tends to cut your chin out. So it tends, when you get up to that angle, you're going to get it. And to Muddy's point, it's about 45 degrees, so that's the rough angle, but it depends on the person. If the person's got deep set eyes, you might have to come down a little bit to catch them. And otherwise you might be able to get up further up with less deep set eyes. So,
and when you do it right, you'll get that Hollywood V, they call it right there. You can see it. Boom. If you got that 45, you'll get that V.
Yeah, Rembrandt lighting.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Tony Mobley, and he asks, is anyone using the iOS 18.1 release candidate?
I have it. I'm kind of an auto on my things, which I don't think I'll do again. Mostly because I just hate photos. on the phone, and it took me a little while to realize how much I hated it. Because what I was noticing was my behavior, which was that I used to open up photos just for fun, just to see what it had given me for like a little photo collection or stuff like that. And I would go and look at things and everything else. And by the end of the summer, by the end of September, I realized I never open up photos ever on my phone. Like, and the change in that behavior was kind of subtle. And I just found it was like this thousand little cuts of things just not being where I want them. I can't find things. I can't select them the same way. I can't preview them the same way. And I get that Apple got really aggressive. I think they just went too far. Like I just think they went too far with the app. And now my phone has become a camera, and I sort my photos on my computer. Like I don't use my phone to go through anything anymore. Like it is like the selection process is a pain. The finding process is a pain. I've turned almost everything new off, and I'm still in this weird, like it's a horror. It is literally it is worse than the butterfly keys, like the upgrade to photos. And as a result, I'm probably going to turn my auto beta. I just went off the beta, and I don't want to auto update because it's the damage is done, but I don't want to keep on doing. I don't trust Apple anymore. Like I just don't. Like I thought that during the beta, it'll get better, and now I'm like, it might not, and maybe I should have just stayed with 17, whatever. Like, and then they moved the spatial. Like the spatial now on the camera is set to, you have to go to the spatial section on the camera rather than just having, there used to be a spatial button on video. Like, oh, I just tap it and now I can watch it. And then they added photos. I figured, well, I'll just go to photos and you'll be able to tap spatial on the photos. No, you have to go to the spatial section to do that now, to do photo. And then you select back and forth. The UI on that is dumb. Like it's just dumb, and so I know that I'm often an Apple cheerleader, but not their best today. 18 has been, it's probably the update that I have disliked the most for years. Like it's like they all just took a little too much LSD and started designing UI. So it's Northern California. You expect people to take LSD, you just don't expect them to design the UI right after they took it. That's the problem. All right. Content recommendations. Guy, you start.
All right. So this one I found probably on some Reddit sound form or something. Do you guys know who Tom Dowd is?
I've heard of him, yeah.
So Tom Dowd, he popularized 8-track recording. He was the first to use an 8-track recorder, popularized stereo recording, pioneered linear channel faders. He invented the fader, helped develop 24-track tape machines, helped develop digital recording. And there is this rare DVD, no longer published. You have to go spend lots of money to get one. I have it here. So I started to watch a little bit of it, but then I thought, I got to get Mickey in on this. So I said, Mickey, you want to jump in a Zoom and we'll do a watch party? So I held off. But this is my pick. It's going to be a good one. Yeah, I mean, he recorded Eric Clapton, John Coltrane, Ray Charles, Otis Redding. So right now they want to put this in the HD version, but because there's so much legal, they can't. There's his estate. He's passed away, but his estate won't let it go out on HD. So it's what's published is published. So this is my content pick, and I don't know what the rules are against broadcasting in after hours, but
I would say there are no rules.
There's no rules. Then we're doing a watch party after this. So
okay, excellent. Go ahead, Grant.
Mine is from the Diary of a CEO podcast, Stephen Bartlett, and he had Trevor Noah on just this most recently. Trevor Noah is the Daily Show. The Daily Show, is that what it was called? Mm-hmm. He was the host, the comedian. Anyway, the thing that it got me thinking about is at the end he was talking about the people finding their tribe, and it made me think he was really pushing back on Stephen and saying that you really need to find that group of people that is your tribe, and that you really connect with, because it makes a big difference to your relationships. When you have a group of people like that, he was saying that your family relationships are better. Anyway, my point was, it made me think about office hours and the tribe that we have here, and the connections that we have, and the friendships that have come out of this out of this amazing group, and then we have common interest, and we have a culture of sharing, which I really love, and so it's worth listening to that podcast, and then it's also just a nod to say thanks to this community as well for being my tribe.
Yeah, it really, it's such an amazing experience. Grant came to the US, and I was so the thing is, people say, well, you can't live all virtually. I'm like, no, you don't live virtually. It's that we get to know each other, and we know each other really well, and then we get excited about hanging out. I mean, one of the reasons, I got, a week and a half ago or whatever, Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket, I know him from other things, and he asked for some advice, and for some live streaming for this benefit that we did on Friday. And the power of the tribe became very clear very quickly. I said, where is it? And they said, oh, it's in Columbia, South Carolina, the Johnston Center or whatever. And I immediately reached out. I reached out to Jeff Francis, and I said, hey, do you know anything about this? So Jeff, we've known now for 4 years or whatever, and you feel like you know him. I said, Jeff, do you know anything about this center? And he's like, I know everything about that center. Like he's like, I work, my office is a block away. These are one of the 2 buildings that I do almost everything in. And so then after that, I realized I need to go. Like I need to go down and be part of this, and, bring some more gear and help, but also that I had a safe person to work with. And then I got to hang out with Jeff. I got to hang out with Jeff and his wife, Amy, and by the way, his wife's amazing cook. Like just it was like these gourmet meals every time we walked in, and got to go to his son's restaurant, got to, there's all this stuff that I got to do. And I was so excited to have someone else in the tribe that I get to see that I haven't seen. And when we do these events in like NAB, we have all these people show up, and it's all these people that I only know on, over the video, over Zoom. And it's just so exciting to actually meet people in person. And so I think that's what's interesting is that it doesn't separate you more. I think it sets us up for when we meet, there's already a shorthand that we already have, that makes it a lot easier to just be authentic and be connected like that. Like there's not, so it makes the physical, getting together much easier than it did before, and if I had more time, it was one of those things, everything was happening so quickly. If I had more time, I would have said, hey, I'm in South Carolina. Let's all work on this project together. And I know that, Muddy might have come down, and some other people would have come down, we would have had 5 or 6 people, and it would have been a big party. And there wasn't quite enough. If I had one more week, I probably would have done that. But it was, but I think that's, I love, I just think that it's what we have created as a group together. I just think is super powerful, and I do think that it makes relationships better, and this idea that I go anywhere, and, I've gone out to, I go hang out with Courtney a couple of times when I've been in LA, and and there's different people, wherever I'm going, there's always a community that I'm part of globally that a lot of times I'm looking for who's going to be around. It's never, I used to be kind of just in the hotel room by myself, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And now that I feel like I always have people to connect with, it's really cool. Yeah. So go ahead, Carl.
So my recommendation is going to be a documentary series. Documentary series came out in 2007, 2008. But it's now, and it was only available on DVD at the time, and I believe was also at the same time being put onto, there was a deal with the History Channel, back when the History Channel showed decent documentaries. But now the people who created the documentary, the production company that made the documentary, are now putting it up on their own YouTube channel, and they're putting up about 2 episodes a week of this documentary series. Documentary series is really the history of the 20th century, probably the first half of the 20th century. Each episode goes for about 30 minutes on average, some 25, some 35 minutes. There are 94 episodes in the documentary series. It's quite an enormous series. It's kind of in the style of Ken Burns with interviews, so it's that kind of quality. And this documentary series was made by George Lucas. It's probably one of the biggest things he ever did. He made it between 2002 and 2007 with Rick McCallum. They shot a lot of the stuff. A lot of the shooting for the documentary series was happening simultaneously while he was shooting episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in London. So some of the interviews he did, Rick McCallum and David Shulman. David Shulman was the producer of the whole series. It was his 9 to 5 to look after it every day, where Rick McCallum and George Lucas were executive producers on the documentary series. So Lucasfilm's own website and their YouTube channel are now putting them up. So they're putting up about 2 episodes a week. They're up to 35 episodes. They are available on the DVD. So if you want to see all the episodes, you can get the Young Indiana Jones Chronicle DVDs, volume 1, 2, and 3. That were released in 2007, 2008. They were additional features. I don't know if you want to call 94 episodes of a documentary series as additional features, but there were additional features, extra features on the DVDs, but this was an enormous project. George sold these into Californian schools for history. So his children were school age at the time, and he saw the quality of the content that his kids were getting in Californian schools was not very good, especially 20th century history. So he simply just made 94 episodes and found the real people, or people who are attached, and found historians and did these interviews. So it's on the Lucasfilm YouTube channel. Just go to playlist and you'll find history documentaries playlist. And as I said, they're adding about 2 per week. So they're not putting them all at once. It's kind of clever this way. And they're putting them up in kind of the order they were on. So there is kind of a chronological order, kind of interestingly how they're put together. Hopefully they release the 3 lectures. There were 3 lectures done by historians as well. They go for about an hour each. They're also on the DVDs. Hopefully they'll put them up towards the end of this so we get those. And so these were essentially, George made them because he wanted to, they kind of go in tandem with the storyline of Young Indiana Jones, which is a whole history kind of series, from a fictional character touching on history points that did happen. And then he thought, okay, when we do the DVD, which happened in, he wanted to finish off Star Wars first. So he actually finished off Star Wars 2005, and then he went 100% into this and a few other projects he went 100% into and made sure they finished off. And he had them finished by 2007, 2008. They kind of, the reason they wanted to get that timeline was because the new Indiana Jones film came out in 2008. And so the actual DVDs, like Lucasfilm weren't going to pay for DVDs to get produced. So I believe it was Paramount were the ones who had the DVDs produced. And so they were happy to add these 100 documentary series onto the DVDs at a considerable cost. And it was Paramount who George actually paid for documentary series to be owned. I believe he owns them. That's why they can put them up on the Lucasfilm YouTube channel. They're not owned by anyone else. But Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, I believe they are owned by, Paramount, I still believe owns, whoever owns, that kind of, the family, I think it was a family channel. There was, as I said, the History Channel did have them for a while. So Lucasfilm did sign over the rights to History Channel for a certain period of time, but they've fallen back. And I believe that's why Lucasfilm can now just put them up on YouTube, because I believe any contract they've had with any other channels for these documentaries has now lapsed. So all rights have returned back to base. So I would strongly suggest watching these. Only, it's a half hour, so you only have to one or two when you're in the mood for a documentary about the 20th century. Really high quality. Obviously, George Lucas and Rick McCallum aren't going to do anything at half scale. Some of the interviews, I believe, happen in the Skywalker Ranch in the library. Some of the interviews happen, they go out and meet people. So you get to see a little bit of Skywalker Ranch. The audio on this is quite amazing, obviously done by Skywalker Sound. So it is really interesting. The expertise I have on this and the breadth of, so for instance, there's one on Teddy Roosevelt, there's one on ballet, there's one on, generals from the First and Second World War. So it's really, there's 94 episodes, they cover quite a lot. There's one on T. Lawrence, there's one on the birth of the Middle East as we know it today. So all these kind of things are covered in documentary. So George Lucas and Rick McCallum really went broad. So you may not be interested in every episode of the 94, but I'm sure you'll find a handful, probably a dozen or two, that will tickle your interest.
And what's incredible is that it's the top shelf on Lucasfilm's, YouTube channel. Like, it's not like they're hiding it somewhere.
This was a big deal for George Lucas. This was really big for him.
It's really cool. It's great recommendation. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm learning some great things on being on after hours one or
extra hours.
Extra hours.
It's very complicated,
Well, one is I saw this question, content recommendations in the queue, and I thought, I wonder what that is. Of course, and everyone then starts sharing the recommendations. I thought, oh crap! All right, I can pull one together here. And then the next thing I'm learning is be careful to follow Carl, because the recommendation I have is not the same caliber. But nonetheless, it actually loops into one of the things that Alex was talking about. And actually one of the bigger things here in office hours is about learning from others that have more expertise than you do. And so I am, and what Alex talked about is traveling. My wife and I are making our first trip to Europe next year. We're planning a trip to Italy. And so my recommendation is on a podcast called Untold Italy. And it's told by two Australian women, and they just have such delightful accents to listen to. It almost doesn't matter what they're teaching you. You could just sit and listen to them. But having the inside knowledge, this expertise of kind of places to go, and again, Untold Italy, some of the things that are off the beaten trail a little bit, it has really been delightful. So it's a very specific audience if you're planning a trip to Italy, but this is a strong recommendation for this group.
And I would my only recommendation for you if you go to Rome is Bonci Pizzerium. So that's all I got to say. You have to be there at 11:30 in the morning. When I do work there, most of my work there in Rome has been in the Vatican, and so it's not very far from the Vatican. So if we're staying in a hotel there, we can walk over. But a lot of times we take a cab because we got to make sure that we're there at 11:30, because by 11:45 the line is 40 minutes deep. Like it's an incredible thing. It is, and they cut the pizza into little strips, and then and it's the potato cauliflower is the best one. I don't know, there's no way that's going to taste good, but one of the people over there said, "Oh, you got to get that one, and it's the best." So that's my
I'm
food
writing it down. Thank you.
I'm going to recommend to watch, at least jump through and watch pieces of the Sonic Sunshine Benefit. That's the one that I worked on Friday. Incredible collection of people, that came together for 2.5 or 3 hours. And played music. Some people sent stuff in. There was a couple live acts. It's not perfect. There's 5 people when there should have been 20 to do the show. So there's a couple things that are on and off and everything else. But it was a great experience. Again, I talked a little bit about, I'm a big fan of both. The two main headliners were Bare Naked Ladies and Toad the Wet Sprocket, and I've been fans of both of them for over 30 years. And, Glenn, the lead singer for Toad the Wet Sprocket, I would do anything for. He's just the nicest. He's just this, one of the nicest, one of my favorite people in the world. Like just you, when you're around him, there's just such a kind energy, about him that I would highly recommend it. And you'll see some of that in that performance. So I would definitely jump around. There's a couple live performances. There's a lot of good recorded performances. The live performances I thought were really good that we had on stage. So anyway, I would highly recommend it. But
how do we find it, Alex?
Go to just on YouTube. It's Sonic Sunshine Benefit, and you can also go to sonicsunshinebenefit.com, and you will see the places where you could give money to help the folks in Asheville. So there's 4 different nonprofits that are there. I would highly recommend supporting one of them. I think that everyone worked really hard on that benefit, and I think that they've raised a bunch of money, but they can always raise more. There's a hole at Asheville that is not going to be filled anytime soon. And so also give early, give often to help the folks in Asheville. So anyway, but I think that there was a lot of great moments in that space. You watched a little bit of it, Guy?
Yeah, I did. I watched quite a bit of it. But yeah, it reminded me of my high school years listening to Toad the Wet Sprocket. So many just cool times back then. And it's rare that I get the hair standing up on my arms, and that I couldn't imagine being there and watching that live. That would have just been one of those moments where you're just like, can I just pay attention to the actual live production instead of looking at the monitors? Because I want to see this in real life. And that was cool that they thanked you guys at the end. Nice work going out there and rallying. And I was hoping to see a lot more, honestly, viewers on that one. I was like, could they have pushed this stream out on like the other bands channels through Restream or something?
I think it came together so quickly that there just wasn't quite as much, of a thought process. There was just, I think that, and I have to admit, I mostly was focused on making sure that it worked, but I think that there were, it's an amazing piece of content. seen by not as many people as you would think, just because of all the, I'm sure there was a variety of things there, but it's really incredible. I will say, I will extend my recommendation beyond the benefit that if you're in one of the cities that towed the Wet Sprocket and Bare Naked Lake, they're touring together right now. The reason they did it for that day was because they were supposed to play in Asheville right after Columbia. So they played in Columbia the night before. They're supposed to play Asheville the next day. And then when they realized when they thought about it, they were like, hey, let's do something. So there was kind of like a last minute decision process of let's do something there to make a difference. So I got to Jeff Francis and I went to the show the night before, and so great to watch them. I mean, they're just, they are incredibly talented musicians that just have a great time playing. Toad the Wet Sprocket is better live. I've seen Toad the Wet Sprocket on and off for 30 years, to their shows. They're better now than they were 30 years ago. They have a lot. There's just this gravitas that I think that they bring to it, and that Glenn brings to it, and they're having so much fun doing it, and they just really have a great time. And the Bare Naked Ladies, it is just a party. Like when they get up there and start playing, they just do crazy things the whole time. Like they know that their hits they need to sing pretty accurately because the whole audience is singing along with them. But the rest of it, you don't know what's going to happen next. Like they just, they're doing these weird solos. And there was one moment at the end where the drummer got off the drums and started singing Highway to Hell by AC/DC. And the lead singer went to the drums and started playing drums. And you were just like, what is going on? And I don't mean they were kind of hacking through it. I mean, he nailed it. Like it sounded like AC in the whole, anyway, it's just, and then they went through this whole medley. And so both artists, if you get to see them, if they're going through, there's like 15, and my sisters actually went to see them in Pittsburgh earlier in the tour. So they were like, hey, we're going to see them. And they were sending pictures. So, but if you get to see them, I would highly recommend it. It's probably the best show I've seen I've started to watch shows again. And this is a big one because I did 3,000 people. I kind of decided if there was more than 300 people or the tickets are more than 500 people and the tickets were more than $60, I wouldn't go. Like I've decided that's the area that I like watching bands. And this was a little bit of an exception with 2,000 or whatever, but such an incredible experience. So I highly recommend that as well. All right. Well, thanks too much for coming and watching our extra hours, our second show of the day. And thanks to our panel, who got another great conversation. Welcome, Muddy, to the group. It's good to have you here, and of course, welcome to everyone else for being here, coming back. Thanks to our great team on the back end, Taylor and everyone else that's working on the show right now. There's a team that kind of does this back end, and there's also, but we have different teams that work on the event during the day. We're doing testing on Saturdays. We have a different team that does them on Sundays. David Paskin is now going to be doing the rundown, and that starts this Thursday. So there's another show that's kind of coming out of the woodwork there as well. So, and they're all different formats and they're all different platforms. So we do this one in Vector, Viz Vector. David Paskin's going to do his in Ecamm. When I do Firesides, I do them in Mimo Live. We use Blackmagic hardware for the Saturday and for the weekday sessions. We use Zoom Production Studio on Sunday. So we went from only having one way to do this to, hey, let's just keep on. If you add a show, it has to be done in a new piece of hardware software. That's the rule. So anyway, so we're having a lot of fun with that. So thanks to everyone on the back end that makes that actually possible. And of course, thank you to everyone watching, asking the questions. These are real short shows without your questions. This one keeps on getting longer somehow. Like we get very few questions, but we've gotten really good at talking about them. So anyway, so thanks so much. And we will see you next week on Extra Hours.